Hello and welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about the nervous system. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Although viewed as a whole, the human body is actually made up of 10 different systems. Each of the systems plays a vital part in the health and well-being of the entire body. In this video, we are going to focus on the nervous system. Here are the components of the nervous system. It is made up of the central nervous system, which has your brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which has your cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The functions of the nervous system can be summarized into this. Three, receive information from the outside world using the sense organs, process that same information in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and devise an appropriate response and to actually respond to that information. So these three is the main functions of the nervous system. It also functions as a storage for long-term and short-term memories. I recommend that before moving further, you watch this video from neurology entitled Nervous System. Get to know our nervous system a bit closer and how does it work. I'll provide the link in the description below. Now this shows us the organization of the vertebrate nervous system. During embryonic development in vertebrates, so that includes humans, the central nervous system develops a hollow dorsal, okay? Empty, hollow, dorsal nerve cord. So this is the hallmark of chordates, and that hollow cord gives rise to the central canal of the spinal cord. So it's a hollow portion of the spinal cord in the middle, as well as the ventricles of the brain. Okay, so these are hollow regions of the brain. The ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, and then most of the gray matter is found on the brain surface, and then the white matter is found inside. And then you have the ventricles inside, which is in the middle, which is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Now again, this shows us the components of the nervous system. So you have the central nervous system, or CNS, which is made up of your brain and spinal cord. And then you have your peripheral nervous system, which is mostly made up of cranial nerves, okay, originating from the brain, and spinal nerves originating from the spine. So let's first look into the relationship of the parts of the nervous system. So we have what we call nerve cells that are responsible for receiving information from the outside world. They are called receptors. Okay, so they detect the stimulus from the environment. So a stimulus is anything that solicits a response from an organism. So it can be pain or pleasure, it can be temperature, it can be light, it can be sound, electricity, electric current, so images, anything that solicits a response or anything that creates a response out of an organism, we call that a stimulus. Stimuli is its plural form. So your receptors, those are your nerve cells that receive information. They detect the stimulus, and what they do is they bring the information to the processing centers of the body, and that would be the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so the processing centers of the nervous system, they try to find meaning, they try to analyze what the information was, and they try to come up with an appropriate response. So what brings the information are called your sensory nerves. Okay, so receptor cells all over your body, your senses, your sense of touch and taste and sight. Your senses detect the stimulus or the information, bring the information to the processing centers, brain and spinal cord, through the sensory nerves all over your body. Right after that, the processing centers will come up with an appropriate response to the stimulus, and that will be through the motor nerves. So those will be your skeletal and muscular system. What is the appropriate response? And it will be carried out by the effectors in your body, effector nerves in your body. So if there's light, are your pupils going to dilate or contract? If there is a threat, are you going to run away or stay? If there's pain, are you going to move away your hand? Or if there's a pleasurable sensation, are you going to lean towards it? So those are acted out by the effectors. Now, the receptors and effectors fall under the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral on the side, okay, along the side, okay, found on the side, while the processing centers, brain and spinal cord, are part of the central nervous system. So this is the relationship of the parts of the nervous system. It's best to see some examples so that we could actually visualize how it happens. So for example, your hand accidentally touched something hot. So the receptors on your hand, okay, thermoreceptors, temperature receptors, and pain receptors on your hand, on your skin, will bring the information via the sensory nerves to the processing centers, brain and spinal cord. Okay? But in this example, it's more on the spinal cord. Okay? It's because the response will be a reflex action. So they will process the information and come up with a response. And it will be led to the effectors through your motor nerves, and the response will be to immediately pull your hand away from the source of high temperature. So the sensory nerves receive information from the outside world, bring the information to the processing center. They respond through the effectors by moving your hand away as done by the motor nerves. Okay? So this action happens in a split of a second, very fast. How about this? If this is the information that your eyes gathered, then they bring the information to the brain and spinal cord. What do you think would be the response? So that for most people, that will be to salivate whenever they see unripe mangoes with fish paste or bagoong. If you receive the information that there's a threatening animal such as a venomous snake, what would be the initial response or the effector response of the motor nerves? That is to, okay, run away, okay, or to move away from the threat. If this is the response, crying, okay, what could have been the stimulus? What could have been the cause? It's the information. It could be pain or fear that caused this individual, this child, to cry. If an animal growls, such as a lion, as seen here, what could have been the information that he received? Perhaps there's another lion in their land, okay, or there's a threat, okay, that could hurt the pride, the lion pride. So that could have been the information, the stimulus. For example, if you saw Zac Efron in person, which is my ultimate crush, okay, I'm willing to trade my husband for him. What do you think is that's how much I like him. So what is the appropriate response if you see him in person? So some girls would giggle, people would be in awe, the male population would be, ooh, there's a celebrity here. Okay, so that would be the response. So again, so this is the relationship of your nervous system. The receptors all over your body. So you have thermoreceptors, pain receptors, light receptors. So these are your sensory nerves, sensory organs. They detect information from the outside world. They detect the stimulus. Okay, so those are your senses: sight, hearing, smelling, touch, and taste. So they bring the information to the processing centers, and then the processing centers would come up with an appropriate response through the muscular system and the skeletal system. What will the body do as a response to the information? So now let's talk about the basic structure of the nervous system. So the nervous system is actually made up of hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, even trillions of nerve cells, also known as neurons. That's the other term, neurons or nerve cells. Okay, they refer to the same thing. So they are electrically excitable cells that process and transmit information in the nervous system, either through electrical or chemical signaling or synapses. So neurons connect to each other to form networks, as you can see here. So this is actually one neuron, another neuron, but as you can see, they are connected to each other by this network. Okay, so this is one neuron, and then this is another neuron, but they're connected. Okay, so one neuron is connected to the rest of the neurons. Okay, so they connect to each other to form networks, and they are the core components of the nervous system. So neurons are found in the brain, spinal cord, and in the peripheral nerve cells or peripheral ganglia. So we see here a network of interconnected neurons. So there are several types of neurons. So those neurons that respond to touch, sound, light, and numerous other stimuli, or they detect the stimuli of the sensory organ and then send it to the brain or spinal cord, are called the sensory neurons. Okay, so they are part of the receptors, sensory neurons. They are part of the receptors, or they are the receptors, and they detect the stimulus from the environment. So again, we remember that they will bring the information to the brain and then the brain will respond. So motor neurons are the ones who receive the response from the brain and spinal cord to cause muscle contraction and affect the glands. Okay, so they will be the one to respond to the stimulus, the motor neurons. Okay, so those are usually part of the skeletal system, the muscular system, part of the endocrine system. They are the ones who respond to the information. They are part of the effectors group of neurons. And then those neurons who are found in between the sensory and motor nerves, they connect the neurons to other neurons. We call them interneurons, between, interneurons. So they connect the neurons to each other and to the brain and spinal cord. So I recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed, How Do Nerves Work? I'll provide the link in the description below. Very informative. Watch this as part of your playlist. So what is the structure of a nervous cell or a neuron or a nerve cell? So here, this is the structure of a typical neuron. So this is actually the cell body. Okay, this is the cell body. And then it has a tail-like structure called the axon. Okay, so this is the axon. Then in between that are the Schwann cells. Okay, Schwann cells. And at the tip of your at the tip of the cell body, or at the tip of the actual cell, you have this extension called the dendrites. So dendrites are filaments that arise from the cell body, and they extend to hundreds of micrometers, and they give and branching off multiple times, giving off the complex dendritic tree. Okay, they look like branches of tree. While the axon is the specialized nerve cell body that arises from the axon is the specialized filament that arises from the actual cell body and can travel for a very far distance. Okay, so this is the tail of the neuron body, and we can have something as long as 1 meter in the human body. Okay, so again, these are the structures of the neurons or of the nerve cell. So, just a side note, so if you still remember our lesson on animal and plant cells, specifically the cell theory, one of the proponents of the classical cell theory was Theodor Schwann. He was the one who said that animals are made up of cells. He had a lot of contributions to the field of biology. He discovered the gastric juice pepsin, the part of the cell theory, and he also discovered this layer of this file of cells that connects the axon to the cell body. So it was named after him, Schwann cells. Okay, so axon, cell body, then dendrites, then Schwann cells, and then axon, the extension of the cell body. So there's an estimate that there are around 1 billion neurons in the cell, in the entire brain, in the entire human brain. However, what's more fascinating than that is the number of connections the neurons have with each other. So there's an estimate of 100 trillion synapses, okay, or connection um, all over the human brain. So a synapse is actually a structure, so that's the synapse, that permits a neuron to pass an electrical or chemical signal to other neuron without touching each other. So that's the end of the structure of one cell, and then this is the start of the structure of another cell. Now this part where they pass on electrical or chemical signals, we call that a synapse. So synapses are essential because they pass on information from one cell to another, and that's how the whole brain communicates. Okay, communicates with each other and communicates with the rest of the body. Okay, so they pass on information, they store information, they respond information through synapses by passing on this structure, either chemically or electrically, and that's how they share information. To learn more about synapses, I recommend that you watch this video. I'll provide the link in the description below. So now let's look into the parts of the central nervous system. So we've mentioned that this is the processing center of the brain, or a processing center of the body, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. So brain and spinal cord. Okay, so this is where the body interprets the information it receives, analyzes the meaning, and decides what to do. That makes the brain a very, very important organ in the body, and damage to the brain can actually affect the function of the entire body. So the brain is so important, it is protected by a bone structure or skeletal structure called the skull. Okay, so the brain is so important, it is protected by a bone, while the spinal cord is also very important because this is how the brain transmits the message to the rest of the body. And it is also so important, it is protected by the vertebral column. Okay, so this is the spinal cord, this thin structure. Okay, and these are the vertebra, singular, vertebrae, plural. So for sure you've seen this, okay, at the back of the skeletal system. So these are the vertebrae. Okay, those are the small pieces of bones that protect the spinal cord. So from vertebrae 1 to 7, so that's the cervical vertebrae. Then you have here thoracic vertebrae, then lumbar vertebrae, sacral vertebrae, and then coccygeal. While we do not have a tail anymore, we have evolved to have no tail anymore. So this is actually the start of the tail. In other mammals, this extends up to their actual tail in cats and dogs and other organisms. But in humans, we evolved not to have what we call this, not to have a tail. So we just have the coccygeal vertebrae here. So these are the tasks, or these are the functions of the body that we're in. This spinal cord, this portion of the spinal cord are in charge of. So neck muscles, diaphragm, wrist and triceps, so that's found in the cervical vertebrae. Thoracic, so that's the hand, abdominal, ejaculation. Then for lumbar, the hips, quadriceps, hamstring, and foot. Then for sacral, penile, erection, bowel, and bladder. So those are the parts. Okay, so again, the central nervous system is so important. They need to be encased in a bone, the skull, and the vertebral column. So still on the brain, so the human brain is the central organ of the human nervous system, and with the spinal cord, again, they make up the central nervous system. So it consists of the cerebrum, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. Okay? So it controls most of the activities of the body, like what I've mentioned, processing, integrating, and coordinating information it receives from the environment, and making the correct decision on how to respond by acting it out by the rest of the body. So how the brain works, I recommend that you watch this video. I will provide the link in the description below. Another video from National Geographic Channel, Brain 101. Again, I'll provide the link in the description below. And how the human brain and the major structures and functions, again, linked in the description below. So all of these videos are very informative. Please watch them all. Okay. So this is the anatomy and the functional areas of the brain. So do not be overwhelmed when you see a diagram as complex as this. It's actually quite easy to understand. It just shows us the different regions of the brain. And I think it's important for you to know that scientists took hundreds and thousands of years before they were actually able to understand all the parts of the brain. And at the moment, we are still trying to understand the different parts of the brain. We haven't really uncovered the entire human brain. So the study of the brain started off during the time of the Egyptians, wherein they would do mummification, and then they would study the brain up to the time of Greeks, up to the time of Hippocrates, and then classical neuroscientists such as Luigi Galvani, and then Ivan Pavlov, to Paul Broca, to Hermann Monk. So all of these scientists' works and hundreds of other scientists contributed to what we know about the different parts of the human brain. So some of the earlier experiments that they conducted was to actually study to autopsy the brain of those who died from brain diseases, and then they tried to compare that with the structure of a regular brain. So for example, they studied they dissected the brain of someone who died because of epilepsy, and then they tried to compare that with a normal brain and try to determine which part of the brain is different. So that led them to conclude that this part is related to an epileptic disease or epileptic abnormality. They also try to study the brain of the chimpanzees. Those are the most closely related organisms to humans in terms of brain function. So they were able to actually experiment on it and then try to determine which parts of the brain functions for this specific purpose. What else? In the modern times they use tools such as the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and then CT scan, computer tomography. So they use all this latest instruments to determine how the brain functions. CT scan, MRI, X-ray. So they did all that. They also use the microscope to dissect the brain and then look at the cells under the microscope. So yeah, so those are the techniques that they use, and they're still continuously evolving in terms of their technology. Right now, they are trying to use artificial intelligence, AI, in creating neural networks of the brain. So there. So let's look at the legend now to see the different areas of the functional areas of the brain. So number one is the visual area of the brain. So that's in charge for sight and image perception and image recognition. So in the human brain, that's found in the occipital lobe. That's at the back of the head. By the way, this is the lateral view, the side view of the brain. So this is the part of the face, and then this is the back of the head. Sagittal view, if you dissect it, if you cut it in half, this is what you will see. So this is the part of the face, and then this is the back of the head. The superior view, this is on top of your head. Okay? If you're looking at the brain on top, and then this is the inferior view if you're looking at the brain from the bottom. Imagine tilting your head and then looking at it from the neck up. Okay? So this is what you see below. So the visual area is found at the back in the occipital lobe. Okay, so occipital lobe at the back of your head. So that's where the visual cortex is found. Number two, association area. That's for the memory, equilibrium, and motion. So that's in the temporal lobe here. Number two. So temporal lobe, left and right temporal lobe. so we cannot see it in the dissected sagittal view, so there's no temporal lobe there. Broca's area, so that's from this was named after Paul Broca, a noted brain scientist, a neuroscientist. Muscle of speech, so number 4, that's found here. Okay, then auditory area, so number 5, so that's here. Emotional area for pain, hunger, fight or flight response, so that's number 6, so here. Then sensory association, number 7, okay, 7. Then olfactory area for smelling, 8. Where's that? Here's 8, so here. Then somatic evaluation of weight, texture, temperatures for number 10. So that's near the occipital lobe here. Major function, 12, cerebral cortex, eye movement and orientation, cerebral cortex here. Higher mental functions, the frontal lobe, concentration, planning, judgment, emotional expression, so here. And for the cerebellum, the functional areas of the cerebellum, here for motor functions. Cerebellum here, here, and here. Okay, so as you can see, all parts of the brain are very important. That's the reason why whenever we ride a motorbike, we have to put a protective helmet on. Even just riding a bicycle, you should actually put a protective gear. Imagine if their frontal lobe got damaged. It means that you cannot do high concentration, high mental functions such as concentration, planning, judgment, creativity. If you damage your occipital lobe, that could have issues with your visual cortex, with your visual area. So we have to protect our brain. So as much as possible, try to avoid damaging your skull, impacting your brain into hard surfaces. Be careful around strenuous sports or contact sports because you have to protect your brain. Okay? This diagram shows us the human cerebral cortex, okay, or the lobes of the cerebral cortex. So again, they have specialized functions, okay. So this is the frontal lobe. So this is the sagittal view or the side view of the brain. Then this is your face, okay. Then this is the back of your head. So the frontal lobe, okay, is made up of your Broca's area for forming speech. You have the prefrontal cortex for decision making and planning. You have the motor cortex, which controls the skeletal muscles. All of those are found in your frontal lobe. In your parietal lobe, so you have your somatosensory cortex, which is responsible for the sense of touch. Then you have the sensory association cortex here towards the back for the integration of sensory information. Then at the back of your head, you have your occipital lobe. So the most important part here is the visual association cortex, which is for combining images and object recognition. Then you have your visual cortex, which is actually responsible for processing visual stimuli, what your eyes can see, as well as pattern recognition. Then on the side of your brain, you have your temporal lobe. So you have here your auditory cortex for hearing. So it's near your ears now. And then the Wernicke's area for comprehending language. And then you have your cerebellum, which we will talk about more later. This is the adult brain viewed from the rear or viewed from the back of your head. So you can actually see the very distinct separation of the left cerebral hemisphere and the right cerebral hemisphere. Now, this entire part of the brain is the cerebrum, which controls the skeletal muscle contraction, and this is the center for learning, emotion, memory, and perception. Okay, so the outer layer of the cerebrum is called the cerebral cortex. So the left side, okay, the left side of the cerebral cortex receives information from the right side of the body. So so what you're receiving from the left, what you're receiving in the or being processed in the left hemisphere are the information from the right side of your body. So it crosses like that, from your right hand to your right foot, while the right cerebral hemisphere is processing information it receives from the left part of your body, from your left hand to your right foot, okay? So it crosses hemisphere like that, okay? Um, a thick band of axons called the corpus callosum enables the right and left cerebral cortices to communicate with each other. Okay, so that connects, corpus callosum connects the left and right hemisphere. Okay, um, so any damage to your brain can actually disrupt motor commands and other body functions. Now, the cerebellum is found here at the bottom of your cerebrum. It coordinates movement and balance, okay, as well as remembering motor skills. It receives sensory information about the positions of the joints and lengths of the muscles, as well as input from the auditory or hearing and visual systems, okay? Hand-eye coordination is also part of the function of cerebellum, and damage to the cerebellum would make the eyes capable of following a moving object, but they will not stop at the same place as the object. Okay? This will also cause some issues with hand movements towards an object. So this is the sagittal view of the center of the brain. So if you cut the brain in half, longitudinally, this is what you will get. So you have your corpus callosum here, your fornix, posterior commissure, pineal gland, the small gland here. Then you have your thalamus, and then hypothalamus below that, the anterior commissure, the midbrain, cerebral aqueduct, and the hypothalamic sulcus. So continuing with the adult brain viewed from the side, okay, so front at left, okay. So you have here the diencephalon, okay, here. It gives rise to the thalamus, hypothalamus, okay, and the epithalamus, okay. So the thalamus here is the main input center for sensory information, okay? Incoming information from all the senses as well as from the cerebral cortex is sorted here in the thalamus and sent to the appropriate cerebral centers for further processing. You also have your hypothalamus. It constitutes the control center that includes the body's thermostat. So it controls the temperature of the body as well as the central biological clock. Okay. It also regulates the pituitary gland. Okay. Through regulation of hunger and thirst, plays a role in sexual and mating behaviors, and initiates the fight or flight response. The hypothalamus is also the source of posterior pituitary hormones, okay, and releasing of hormones that act on the anterior pituitary. The epithalamus includes the pineal gland here at the back, and which is the source of melatonin, a very important hormone in the body. Now, the brain stem here consists of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So the midbrain receives and integrates several types of sensory information to send it to the specific regions of the brain. The midbrain also coordinates visual reflexes as well as peripheral vision reflexes. So that happens when the head turns towards an object approaching from the side, okay, of your face, of your head, without the brain having formed an image of the object. Okay. For the pons, the major function of the pons and the medulla oblongata is to transfer information between the peripheral nervous system and the midbrain. Okay. So most of the axons that carry the instructions about large-scale body movements cross from one side of the central nervous system to the other side through the medulla oblongata. Okay. Another function of the medulla oblongata is the control of several automatic homeostatic functions such as breathing, heart and blood vessel activity, swallowing, vomiting, and digestion. The pons also participates in these activities, specifically regulation of breathing centers in the medulla. There's this long-term belief that the hemispheres of the brain, the cortex of the brain, can actually influence a person's personality. They say that The left brain people, or those with a dominant left brain, they say, are more into analysis. They like studying language, mathematics, science, ano pa ba, experiments and numbers. While those people with a dominant right brain are said to be creative, so they are more attuned to their emotion. They like music and idea and inspiration. However, this has long been debunked. Okay, this has long been corrected, and there's actually a video that I will recommend that will correct this misconception. So if you ever see a Facebook post asking you, are you a left brain or a right brain person? That's mostly, just for fun. Okay, there's really no difference between the association between the left brain and the right brain. So I have a lot of recommended videos for you to watch. The first one is from TED Ed, How the Food You Eat Affects Your Brain. So this is very important for a student like you. I'll provide the link in the description below. Then the benefits of a bilingual brain. Still from TED Ed. So this is important for you to know so that you will be encouraged to actually learn better in English. So aside from knowing Tagalog, now you also have to learn another language, and then if you have the time, another language, a third language, because there's really a lot of benefits for being bilingual or trilingual in terms of our brain functions. So currently, I'm studying Japanese. So that aside from Filipino, I can also speak in English, and now I'm trying to learn how to speak in Japanese. Okay, so in my spare time, I try to learn some small Japanese phrases. So just to exercise my brain. So I think I recommend that you also do the same. So this one is from TED Ed. What percentage of your brain do you use? So this is to answer that long-standing idea that we only use 10% of our brain. That's not true. That's not possible. If you believe that you are only using 10% of your brain in your daily lives, then perhaps you are really just using 10% of your brain. The gendered brain, is there a difference between a male and a female brain? For the longest time, people thought that the male brain functions differently than a female brain, leading to a lot of sexist beliefs and principles. So this video will correct all that. So I recommend that you watch this one, linked again in the description below. This was the question. This was the video I was talking to you a while ago. So, is there really are people really left-brained or right-brained? So, Show will answer that question for you. Just watch this video. So, this will correct all the misconception about being a left-brainer or a right-brainer, and there's really no such thing. So, again, link in the description below. This one is actually from one of my favorite YouTube channels, CGP Gray. You are too. This video is quite scary, creepy, mind-blowing because it talks about what will happen to a person if the connection between the left brain and the right brain is severed, if the corpus callosum is cut. And it has been done before. A lot of experiments have been conducted in the past, and the results are mind-blowing. So I recommend you watch this video. It's a little bit scary, a little bit weird, but fun to watch. So again, linked in the description below. So now we go to the second part of the central nervous system, the spinal cord. So again, it runs from the base of the brain down along your vertebral column at the back. So it's a long, thin, tubular bundle of the nervous tissue, and supports cells that extends from the brain. So it has three major functions. It serves as a highway for the sensory information to travel up to the brain. Okay? It also serves as a highway for motor information downwards, right, down the spinal cord. And it also serves, so it connects the body to the rest of it connects the body to the brain, and it connects the brain to the rest of the body. So information to the brain via the spinal cord, then brain responds through the spinal cord towards the rest of the body. So it also serves as a center for coordinating certain reflexes. A reflex arc is the neural pathway that mediates a reflex action. So in higher animals, most sensory neurons do not pass directly into the brain, okay? But they are just synapsed or processed in the spinal cord. So they bypass the brain to give out an appropriate, faster response. So this characteristic allows reflex actions to occur again relatively quickly by activating spinal motor neurons without the delay of going through the brain. So information goes directly into the spine, and then the spine responds right away without consulting or going through the brain. So how does that happen? So it shows here the reflex shown here. That's the movement of the right leg. Okay, the movement of the right leg is initiated artificially by tapping the tendon connected to the quadriceps muscle. So the doctor will usually have this tool. Okay, so during a doctor's consultation, no, to check your responses, your reflexes, he or she will tap the tendon here in your knee. The sensors detect the sudden stretch of the quadriceps, and sensory neurons will convey the information to the spinal cord. It will bring the information to the spinal cord. In response to the signals from the sensory neurons, motor neurons convey signals to the quadriceps, causing it, so it will reply, it will respond right away. It will no longer go to the brain. Right there at the spinal cord, okay, motor neurons will cause the muscles to contract and jerk, okay? Jerk the lower leg, okay? Interneurons in the spinal cord also receives signals from the sensory neurons, and the motor neurons that lead to the hamstring are inhibited by those same interneurons, okay? So this inhibition prevents the contraction of the hamstring, which would resist the action of the quadriceps. So overall, this is your leg. To test your reflex reaction, the doctor will strike the tendon. So the information will be brought to the spinal cord. The spinal cord with using sensory neurons passing through the interneurons will respond right away, okay, without going through the brain, causing this action, a reflex action, to occur relatively quickly, okay, than what's usually than starter reflex, it allows us to move quickly, to move away from the danger. Newborn babies also have a lot of reflexes that they have inherited from their ancestors. We all have them. The first is the tonic neck reflex, wherein the baby will have this automatically arrange its arms. Okay, a baby will arrange his arms this way, as if it's fencing, like that. So we call it the tonic reflex, tonic neck reflex. The grasp reflex, it will allow them to grab whatever that's near their palm. The step reflex, even if they cannot stand, they cannot walk yet. If you stand them upright, they will try to move their feet as if they're walking. And then crawl reflex, they will try their best using their arms and um, thigh muscles to move around, to crawl around. Now, newborn reflexes are actually remnants of our ancestral survival instincts. Okay, these are the survival instincts that were passed on to us. So our primate ancestors, when their babies must learn how to grasp as soon as they were born, right away, as soon as they can, to grasp the fur of their mother. For example, our ancestral primates, they have to learn how to grasp the fur so that when their mother moves around the trees or moves from one place to another, they will not be left behind. So as babies, they have to learn how to grasp right away. Step reflex, they are trying, our ancestors they have to learn how to walk as soon as possible so that they will be safe from danger, as well as crawl reflex. They have to learn how to crawl right away. So rooting reflex is another important survival reflex, survival instinct of babies, wherein they have to learn how to suck milk from their mother's nipple right away. So whenever they are placed near the bosom, near the breast of their mother, they will instinctively look for the nipple of their mother so that they could suck the milk right away. If you have newborn puppies, newborn kittens, you can see it. You can see that they also have this rooting reflex. This is common to mammary mammals, those with mammary glands. So if the newborn baby is placed near the nipple of their mother, they will suck milk automatically. So there. Now the next part of the nervous system is the peripheral nervous system. So this includes the cranial nerves. So those are the nerves coming from the brain, and the spinal nerves, the nerves coming from the spinal cord. So they connect the brain and spinal cord towards the rest of the body. So as you can see here, the yellow area, the brain and spinal cord, is part of the central nervous system, while the nerves here, the cranial and peripheral nerves, are part of the peripheral nervous system. We have a total of 12 pairs, so that's 24 cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves, so that's 62 spinal nerves. So cranial nerves are nerves that emerge directly from the brain. Okay, so we have 12 pairs. So only the first and the second pair emerge from the cerebrum. The remaining 10 emerge from the brain stem. Spinal nerves, on the other hand, refer to the nerves which carries motor, sensory, and autonomic signals between the spinal cord and the rest of the body. So we have 31, so that's 62 total of spinal nerves. So let's look first at the cranial nerve. So this is the inferior view of the brain. So as you can see here, where's that? So the color red are sensory fibers. So they detect information from the brain. Color blue, motor nerves, they respond to the information. So you have, yeah. So for cranial nerve 1, so that's a sensory fiber, okay, from the nose. So it receives information from the nose, then it brings to the brain. Number 2 is optic sensory fiber. So information from the eye, information it brings to the brain. 3, ocular motor. So this one is color blue. It means that it allows us to control it. Okay, so it's a motor action. So oculomotor motor fiber allows us to control eye muscles. So it's found here. 4, cochlear motor. So superior oblique muscle. Okay. Then 5, where's 5? 5, trigeminal sensory. So color red, it's a sensory fiber. It allows us to detect information or senses from the face, sinuses, and teeth. Then 6, adducent motor, external rectus muscle. So all of these are found in the eye. Okay, eye region. So these are motor fibers that allows us to control the eyes. 5, 6, 7, facial motor. So that's another motor fiber. It allows us to control the muscles of the face. 8, 8, yeah, vestibulocochlear sensory. So it's a sensory fiber. It allows us to get information from the ears. Okay. 8, 9, glossopharyngeal motor. Okay, so it's actually both a sensory and motor fiber. So it allows us to detect information from the tongue and the tonsil, and then it also allows us to control the tongue. Okay, we cannot control the tonsil; it's just hanging there. So it allows us to control our tongue. And then 9, 10, vagus motor. So it's both a sensory and motor fiber. So it allows us information from the heart, lungs, bronchi, and gastrointestinal tract, and then also trachea, larynx, pharynx, and gastrointestinal tract. So all of here in the vagus motor nerve. Then 10, 11, accessory motor. So it's a motor fiber. It allows us to control the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscles. Okay, so that's around here, this region, and then in our shoulders, and then 12, hypoglossal muscle of the tongue. So it's a motor fiber. So these are the spinal nerves. Okay, we have quite a lot. So ayun, so so we have allocated the following codes for cervical vertebrae. So that's 1 to 7. So this includes the eyes, mucous membranes of the palate, lacrimal gland, submaxillary gland, mucous membrane of the mouth. From dorsal 1 to 12 vertebrae, so that's here. So that includes the trachea, the larynx, the control of the bronchi, lungs, esophagus. So lumbar, it includes the intestine, appendix, abdomen, sex organs, sciatic nerve, sacro. So that's hips and bones, coccyx, rectum, and anus. Okay. So yeah, so these are the organs in which the spinal nerves are in charge of. So aside from those cranial nerves, the peripheral nervous system is also divided into two divisions: somatic and autonomic nervous system. So the somatic nervous system, or CNS, is the voluntary part of the nervous system. It means that we can actually move them through voluntary control via the skeletal muscles. Okay, so yun. So the somatic nervous system connects the brain and the spinal cord to skeletal muscles. So those are the muscles found that you can move: your arms, your legs, your head, your face. So the skeletal muscles of your body, that's under the somatic nervous system. While the autonomic nervous system, it connects the central nervous system to the involuntary muscles. Okay? So those are the parts of your body that you cannot control. They just happen automatically. That's why autonomic nervous system. So it connects the brain to your smooth muscles. So that's found in your gastrointestinal tract. It connects the brain to your glands. You do not control that. It just happened. To your cardiac muscles. So those are the muscles of the heart. And adipocytes. So those are the fat cells. Okay. So it connects your brain and spinal cord to this visceral effectors, or the visceral parts of your body that you cannot control. So you can control somatic nervous system, move the body around. Then what's happening within your body? Autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is further divided into two: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions. So sympathetic are active in stress, in times of stress, and parasympathetic returns the body to a state of equilibrium to conserve energy. So what do we mean by that? So these are the divisions of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nerves are the fight or flight actions of the body. It means that these are the actions that are activated when we are under stress. So it dilates the pupils when we are stressed so that our eyes could receive more information to all of these are important for survival. Okay? So when we are under stress, it allows us to see better, inhibits, so it stops the salivary glands from producing saliva, so that it will also inhibit intestinal activities and inhibits so that you will not get hungry yet, so that you'll be focusing on fighting or fleeing from the source of stress. Increase heartbeat to supply and oxygen to the rest of the body. It allows us to breathe better. Um, Secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these are your fight or flight hormones. It relaxes the bladder. So sometimes, when we are under stress, we have to go to the bathroom, and it promotes ejaculation and vaginal contraction. However, we cannot be stressed all the time. Our body cannot undergo stress all this time. It has to be, homeostasis has to be achieved. The body has to undergo equilibrium. Therefore, once these actions are activated and the stress has passed, then the parasympathetic nerves will return everything back to normal. So after the stress, the parasympathetic nerves will constrict the pupils. It will stimulate the saliva, so you will get hungry, stimulate stomach activity so that you will be hungry, and intestines. It slows the heartbeat. It constricts the airways. It contracts the bladder, so you don't have to pee anymore, and it promotes erection of genitals during sexual activity. So you cannot be under stress all the time. Sooner or later, the parasympathetic nerves will return everything back to homeostasis, back to normal. So these are more related videos. So how the stress affects your brain? So we've talked about this under stress. So this is from TED Ed. I'll provide the link in the description below. And more videos from TED Ed. What's so special about the human brain? Link in the description below. And let's try this very quick pop quiz. Okay, it's quite easy. So what do we call this region of the brain? This is the cerebrum. Number 2, that's the thalamus. And 3, that's the brainstem. And 4, that's the cerebellum. Okay? To learn more about diseases of the human body, specifically diseases of the nervous system, I recommend that you visit this lecture PDFs, okay, found in the online library. I'll provide the link in the description below. That ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.